It happened faster than I could blink. 9:03 a.m. I still remember the exact time because my badge beeped green when I tapped it. That meant I still belonged. Or so I thought. I was carrying a lukewarm coffee in one hand and the final performance log in the other, our best benchmark yet for the Omega Strand prototype. My system. The one I'd built over 7 years, piece by piece, glitch by glitch. I stepped into the executive conference room, still thinking about voltage optimization metrics. Then I saw them. Blake Farron, Ardentis Labs' newly appointed CEO, sat at the head of the table like a man posing for a magazine shoot. On his left was HR. On his right, someone I didn't recognize, dressed in navy with no laptop. Legal, probably. No one greeted me. No one smiled. Blake folded his hands and said, "Elena, let's make this quick. Your role has been deemed redundant. Effective immediately." That was it. No thank you. No mention of Omega Strand. No acknowledgement of the system I architected from a storage closet in year 1. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. But as I turned to leave, I slid my hand into my coat pocket and felt the cold, smooth edge of a USB drive I'd carried every single day for 6 months, not for storage, but for activation. 14 minutes later, at 9:17 a.m., the United States Patent and Trademark Office received a live filing for the full Omega Strand framework. Inventor. Elena Marks. Not Aldentis. Not Blake. Just me. They thought they had erased me. What they didn't know is that I had designed the system to remember. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been erased from your own work, cut out of something you built from the ground up? Because if you have, or even if you fear it might happen one day, stay with me. This story is for you. And if it already hits a nerve, don't scroll. Like this video, and let's keep going. They never saw how it started. There was no grand ceremony, no launch announcement, no vision statement etched on a glass wall. Just me, a folding chair, a second-hand ThinkPad, and a blinking power node that couldn't stay online for more than 5 minutes without crashing. They called it Project Horizon Pulse back then, before the rebrands, before the media buzz, before anyone thought it would matter. I was 27, freshly recruited, not as a lead, not even as full-time staff. My official title was Contracted Systems Specialist. That was code for, you're on your own. My workspace was a converted janitor's closet, no windows, one overhead flickering light, and a draft that made it feel like the room inhaled whenever someone opened a hallway door. But that's where Omega Strand was born. I taped hand-drawn schematics to the walls, then the ceiling when I ran out of space. I debugged voltage instability at 2 a.m. with vending machine coffee and trembling fingers. The only person who ever knocked on my door was the night janitor, and even he thought I was part of the cleaning crew. No one knew. No one asked. And I didn't care. Because somewhere in that silence, I began to hear things no one else could: patterns, behaviors, breakdown points in how automated load redistribution reacted to unstable energy streams. Omega Strand wasn't flashy. It didn't look like AI or sound like marketing buzzwords. But it worked. Quietly, reliably, consistently. And I kept building. By the end of year 2, Ardentis finally noticed. They moved me to a real lab, sort of. It had one window and a chair that didn't squeak. They gave me a title upgrade, Lead Systems Engineer. It sounded impressive until I learned the reports still went through someone else for visibility purposes. That someone else was Asher Lane. Back then, Asher was still fresh, eager, raw. He sat across from me in the lab like a sponge, with shoe soaking in every line of logic I explained, every architecture draft I scribbled out on glass walls. He asked questions no one else dared to ask. I saw potential in him, maybe even a little of myself. So, I taught him. I covered for him when he misconfigured the neural adapter and nearly fried the feedback loop. I helped him rewrite his first protocol draft line by line. He once told me, "You're the only person here who talks to the system like it's alive." I smiled at that, because in some ways, it was. By year 4, Omega Strand was finally stable. 9, 2% load accuracy. 9, 7% predictive correction under simulation. But something shifted. I wasn't looped into meetings anymore. My name quietly disappeared from internal briefs. And when Omega Strand hit full deployment at year 5, it was no longer developed by Elena Marks. It became led by the Ardentis integration team. I remember opening a company newsletter one morning and seeing a photo of Asher shaking hands with the CTO under a banner that read, "Innovation in Motion." No mention of me. Not even a footnote. I didn't complain. I didn't correct anyone. Instead, I stayed late again refining fail-state detection code no one else knew existed. The silence had settled in by then. Not peaceful silence. The kind that clings to your ribs like damp air. The kind you carry home with you. The kind that whispers, "Don't rock the boat. They're watching." So I didn't. For a while. But that kind of silence, it builds pressure. And sooner or later, pressure always finds its release. By the end of year 5, Ardentis Labs had gone from a scrappy innovation hub to the darling of every West Coast VC fund with a drone budget and a slick pitch deck. Omega Strand was the crown jewel, a quietly efficient neural framework that stabilized dynamic energy loads across unmanned defense systems. It didn't have the wow factor of AI mascots or flashy UIs, but it worked. More importantly, it scaled. And in the tech world, scalable meant fundable. Investors started showing up in blazers with no ties. Strategists came next. Then came consultants. And finally Blake Varon. He arrived on a Monday morning in a matte black town car and a custom-cut charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual equipment budget. His handshake was firm, his smile calculated, and his eyes scanned every room like he was memorizing where power sat. Blake wasn't an engineer. Not even close. But the board didn't care. He had vision. Now, he talked like a TED Talk and walked like every hallway was a stage. Global scale, he said during his first all hands. Agile pivoting. Market disruption. Words that made consultants nod and engineers blink. I watched him from the back of the room, arms folded. He didn't mention Omega Strand. He didn't mention engineering at all. Just revenue potential. Vertical integration. Licensing opportunities. A month later, he called a closed-door session with department leads. I wasn't invited. Asher was. That was the first crack. Soon after, job titles started shifting. The integration team absorbed Omega Strand officially. I was now Senior Systems Liaison, which meant nothing. My team was split. My access was limited. Some systems I'd written from the ground up I couldn't even open without requesting new credentials. And Blake? He toured the labs once, stopped by my workstation, nodded vaguely at the interface I'd built over 5 years, and said, "I love the aesthetic here. Makes the code feel elegant." I stared at him. Not in awe. In disbelief. Then he pointed at the schematic on the screen and added, "You know, Elena, the system is the bones. But leadership? Leadership makes the skeleton dance." I wanted to correct him. Tell him bones are the skeleton. But I just nodded and turned back to my screen. That was Blake. Style over substance. Sound bites over blueprints. And for some reason, people listened. The investors adored him. He raised $80 million in his first quarter. Ardentis made headlines. We were no longer an engineering company, we were a tech brand. And in brands, builders fade. Storytellers rise. I kept showing up. Kept refining. But I was being written out, frame by frame. Meeting invites stopped landing in my inbox. Design updates were passed through communications for polishing. Even my diagrams were rebranded with clean new logos and different font choices. It felt like watching your own handwriting get translated by a stranger. Flattened, simplified, stripped of all the nuance that made it real. I stayed quiet. For a while. Because I knew something they didn't. They thought Omega Strand was done. but I knew its most important function hadn't even been activated yet. His name was Asher Lane. When I first met him, he was just a skinny intern with sleeves too long and questions that came too fast. He used to fumble with the test rigs, spill coffee on blueprints, and apologize every 5 minutes like it was a tick. But he learned fast. Faster than most. And I liked that. I still remember the first time he crashed the diagnostic server. His face went pale when the screen froze. Everyone else bailed out of the lab. I stayed. We sat side by side for 4 hours that Friday night, debugging a broken loop he didn't understand yet. "I'm not cut out for this," he said at one point, voice low. I told him, "Everyone crashes something. What matters is what you build after." He never forgot that. Or maybe he did. Because somewhere along the way, Asher stopped asking questions. He stopped staying late. Stopped checking drafts with me before they went into production. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was busy. Omega Strand was maturing, branching into subsystems I hadn't even dreamed of in year one. The interface layer had been stabilized, predictive recalibration was nearly seamless, and we were 3 weeks away from full simulation deployment. Then I opened a quarterly architecture review memo. I scanned it like I always did, looking for updates, risks, test results. And stopped cold when I hit the credits section. Lead architect. Asher Lane. Supervising engineer. Internal integration team. My name wasn't there. Not in footnotes. Not in diagrams. Not in the digital signature chain. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A formatting glitch. But it wasn't. Because a week later, I sat in a presentation and watched Asher demo my adaptive load test logic verbatim without even glancing in my direction. He didn't stumble. Didn't stutter. He spoke like it had always been his. I watched the room applaud. The investors nod. Blake smile from the front row. I sat in the back, hands folded in my lap. And I said nothing. But it didn't stop there. The next build cycle, I submitted a stability note flagging a potential issue if the system was ever hard disconnected mid-sequence. It was just a line. One sentence. A courtesy. A warning. If the Omega Strand system is shut down from the external end, the purge sequence activates at root level. It's hard-coded. Just be careful. Asher didn't respond. Later, I found out he'd marked the message low priority and forwarded it to infrastructure support with a smiley face. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. That night, I stayed in the lab until after midnight, watching the simulation logs scroll by like ghost code. My code. My system. It's a strange feeling watching someone take credit for your life's work in real time. Stranger still when it's someone you once protected. And in that moment, something inside me settled. Not out of anger. Not yet. But out of clarity. I finally understood what silence had cost me. And what I needed to do next. It started with a search bar. One night, long after the office lights had dimmed and the only sounds were the hum of the HVAC and my own heartbeat, I typed 7 words into a private browser window. "Can you patent your work while employed?" It felt like betrayal. Like treason. Like I was turning against the very company I'd helped build from the inside out. But I had to know. I needed to understand what protections I had, if any, before they buried my name completely. That's when I found her. Dana Cole. Intellectual property attorney. No glossy website, no catchy tagline. Just a single-page site with blunt language and better credentials than half the board combined. I sent her a message. She responded in under 10 minutes. We met the next evening at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Ardentis campus. She wore a black turtleneck, no makeup, and had the kind of presence that didn't need small talk. I told her everything start to finish. How Omega Strand began. The schematics, the sleepless nights, the lines of code that carried my fingerprints, line by line, across every subsystem. When I finished, she leaned back and said simply, "You're not crazy, you're just unprotected. But that can be fixed." We got to work. I began compiling everything. Build logs, local commits, time-stamped drafts, internal emails, deleted notes I'd saved in mirror drives. For weeks, I worked 2 full-time jobs. One for artists, one to reclaim what they didn't know they were stealing. Dana built the legal foundation. I built the trigger mechanism. We called it mirror lock. It was quiet, invisible, embedded directly into the back end of the Omega Strand framework, deep enough that it wouldn't be flagged, but precise enough to act when needed. It had 3 conditions for activation. 1. My internal credentials had to be revoked. 2. My corporate access disabled from the root level. 3. A specific document signed by executive leadership had to be verified and archived in the protocol's mirror. Only when all 3 aligned would mirror lock activate. And when it did, it would extract the final Omega Strand architecture logs from my private vault, encrypt the assets, and file them automatically with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Under my name. Not our dentists, not Blake, not Asher. Just mine. To anyone else, it would look like a standard logging utility. But to me, it was a failsafe. A message embedded in machine logic. A whisper only the system would understand when the moment came. The irony? I didn't want to use it. Part of me still believed they might do the right thing. That Asher would remember the early days. That Blake would value integrity over optics. But belief doesn't file patents. Systems do. And so I built one that would protect me when no one else did. They were rewriting my name out of every version. I was writing it back into the core itself. Just in case. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic day. Not a day with tension in the air or thunder in the sky. Just a Tuesday, quiet, gray, unassuming. Blake had just returned from New York after what he called a monumental investor lunch. His energy filled the office like static buzzing, artificial, impossible to ignore. People leaned in when he walked by. Smiled bigger. Laughed louder. He thrived on it. I, meanwhile, had a folder. Inside. A document titled Q2 Neural Optimization Benchmark. Executive Summary. 7 pages. Mostly graphs. Projections. Performance deltas. The kind of data Blake liked to skim, nod at, and sign while sipping espresso from a tiny ceramic cup. Page 7, however, was different. Buried between latency statistics and a recalibration appendix, there was a declaration. 1 line of legal confirmation embedded in plain sight. Cross-referenced with build logs. Tied to my internal ID. Written in language so technical it would have made a marketer's eyes glaze over. It read, all proprietary algorithms referenced in this report are attributable to initial design and authorship by Senior Systems Liaison, Elena Marks, in accordance with U.S. Patent Provisional Code 4128B. That was it. The line Dana and I had spent weeks perfecting. Neutral on the surface. Legally binding underneath. All it needed was one thing, a signature. Blake walked into the operations room late, still talking about seed round over coffee. He dropped his coat on a chair, reached for the folder without looking at the title, and said, "Let's move quick today. Just need the highlights." He flipped pages like someone skimming a menu. At page 4, he paused, briefly frowned at a chart but didn't comment. At page 7, he didn't even blink. Just uncapped a pen, scribbled his name at the bottom, and handed the folder back. "We good?" he asked. I nodded once. "Perfect," I said. He left 5 minutes later to prepare for a video call with the board. His voice faded down the hall, still full of vision, still selling futures he hadn't built. I held the folder in my hands for a long moment. The signature ink still wet. The lines still quiet, still unnoticed. But now it was real. That night, I scanned the signed document, encrypted it, and uploaded it to Mirrorlock's legal trigger node. The system verified the metadata, cross-checked the hash, flagged the signature, stored it. 3 conditions. That was number 3. The final piece was now in place. The system was armed not for vengeance, not even for strategy, but for survival. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked home in the Seattle rain, headphones in, eyes forward. Because I knew something no one else in that building did. The next time they tried to erase me, they'd be signing over everything I ever built. And the best part? They'd already signed. It was quiet that morning. Too quiet. The kind of quiet you don't notice until it wraps around you like a fog, thick and heavy with something unspoken. I'd felt it the moment I walked through the Ardentes lobby. The receptionist didn't meet my eyes. The elevator stopped one floor short. My keycard still blinked green. But the air felt wrong. 9:03 a.m. That was the time I entered the executive suite. HR was already seated. A man I didn't recognize, legal counsel, probably was tapping on a tablet with a stylus that never left the screen. And Blake? He was leaning back in his chair like this was routine. No greetings. No small talk. Just a nod. A paper. And the words. Elena, your role is being dissolved. Effective immediately. No mention of Omega Strand. No gratitude. Not even a line about valuable contributions. I didn't flinch. Didn't ask questions. I'd already asked them all months ago, and silence had been their answer. I reached for the envelope on the table. Severance package. NDA. Standard exit paperwork. But in my coat pocket, my fingers brushed against something colder. Smaller. A USB drive. Black. Smooth. Unmarked. Not for storage. Not for backup. For activation. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out. By the time I passed the second-floor server room, Mirrorlock had already begun its work. At 9:07 a.m., my internal credentials were officially revoked. At 9:09 a.m., my system access was terminated from root level. At 9:17 a.m., the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office received a live filing containing the full Omega Strand protocol, complete with architecture logs, version history, legal metadata, and Blake Farron's signed confirmation embedded in the documentation chain. Inventor. Elena Marks. Filed. Verified. Timestamped. Irrefutable. I didn't smile. Didn't cheer. I just sat at the cafe down the street, sipping coffee that had gone cold, watching the sunlight crawl across the floor like nothing had happened. But something had. The system had spoken in the only language they respected. Legal. Technical. Permanent. They thought they had buried me. But all they had done was trigger a process they never even saw coming. And as I stared at the email from the USPTO, subject line blinking quietly on my phone. Filing confirmed, status, active. I knew. Not a single alarm had gone off. Not a single person had noticed the trap they walked into. And that was the point. So, let me ask you this. What would you do if your entire life's work was being stolen right in front of you by the people you once trusted most? Would you yell? Would you fight back? Would you walk away? Or would you build a system so airtight that the day they tried to erase you, you'd already written your name into history? If you know that kind of silence, the kind that watches, waits, and prepares, leave a comment. I want to know how you protected yourself when no one else did. They didn't notice it at first. At 9:17 a.m., the patent was filed. The confirmation was sent. But inside Ardentes, everything seemed normal. Blake went back to his next meeting. Asher was in the ops room, sipping his matcha, checking system logs like it was any other Tuesday. The first sign came at 9:23. A low-priority alert popped up in the core server interface, something about missing redundancy references in the Omega Strand backend. The text dismissed it. Probably a sync delay. They had no idea what was already unraveling. At 9:28, the CTO was called in. The system had failed to initiate its standard mirror boot protocol. No backups were loading. No version history. No internal archive. Just one line of text stamped over the diagnostic logs. Source registry not found. By 9:30, 1. They were panicking. They pulled up every recovery node. Nothing. They tried the encrypted vault on the West Coast mirror. Still nothing. That's when someone whispered it. Did Elena do this? Not with malice. Not even with anger. But with the kind of hushed awe you give a magician after realizing the trick was never random. The room fell quiet. Not the kind of silence that waits for orders. The kind that realizes it's already too late. Meanwhile, Asher was frozen in front of his screen. Because he remembered. The email I sent. Weeks ago. One sentence. One warning. If the system is ever shut off from the wrong end, it's designed to purge core code archives. It's buried. Be careful. He'd laughed. Marked it low priority. Forwarded it with a shrug and a smile. Now? His hands were trembling. Because every server he touched was clean too clean. Not corrupted. Wiped. Deliberately. And when he asked the obvious question, who triggered it? The answer hit harder than any accusation. No one did. The system triggered itself. Exactly as designed. Exactly as I had planned. In a glass conference room upstairs, Blake was still trying to spin it. Calling it a brief hiccup. A minor system sync. Legal was already in motion. Tablets out. Faces blank. And somewhere, someone pulled up the patent filing confirmation. They read the name on the document. They checked the timestamp. They saw the signature. His signature. The same signature he'd scrawled on that 7-page report 2 weeks ago. The one he didn't read. The one that turned his empire into someone else's legacy. I wasn't in the room when they realized it. But I didn't need to be. Because from my table at the cafe down the block, I felt the ripple. Not like thunder. More like a glass, tipping slowly on the edge of a table. And then falling. They had underestimated me. Dismissed me. Erased me from their board slides and investor decks. But now, they weren't just losing code. They were losing control. Control of the system. Control of the narrative. Control of the lie they had so carefully constructed. And all of it collapsed. In silence. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone vibrating off the nightstand. I thought it was just another notification from my bank or a weather alert. But then I saw it. 6-8 unread messages. 2-7 missed calls. 1-4 new mentions on platforms I didn't even use anymore. I blinked into the light, heart racing in that half-awake confusion that hits before memory kicks in. And then I saw the headline. Fired at 9:03. Patented at 9:17. It was splashed across the homepage of a major tech outlet, bold, black letters on a white background, with my name directly underneath. Elena Marks, former systems engineer at Ardentis Labs, filed a full legal patent for the Omega Strand framework just 4 minutes after her termination. The article was thorough. Too thorough. Someone had leaked the filing. The timestamps. Even footage from the termination meeting security camera angle, HR's deadpan face, Blake's voice like a knife. It didn't take long. By noon, the clip had hit 3 million views. Within the hour, it was stitched into TikToks, dubbed over with dramatic music, and dissected in Reddit threads with titles like, "They tried to erase her. She erased their system instead." And the hashtags. God, the hashtags. Number Justice for Elena. Number Read before you sign. We are not redundant. Omega stolen. Ardentis exposed. It wasn't just the tech community anymore. It was everywhere. I watched from my couch, wrapped in an old hoodie, holding a coffee I hadn't touched in an hour. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. Investors started pulling out. One venture group posted a vague but ominous tweet. "We are reviewing our ongoing partnerships in light of new information." Another firm announced they were freezing further investment until governance is reassessed. Blake, of course, tried damage control. He went on a morning interview show, 2 days later, smile too tight, voice too smooth. The anchor didn't waste time. "Mr. Veron, Can you confirm if Ardentes holds any ownership over the Omega Strand patent? Blake's expression faltered. Just for a second. Barely visible. We're in the process of reviewing the documentation, he said. This development came as a surprise to us, and we remain committed to clarity and transparency moving forward. The internet didn't buy it. Because someone blessed their defiance posted a side-by-side edit within minutes. His interview line cut directly against the security footage of my termination. This development came as a surprise. Overlaid with, "Your role has been deemed redundant." Effective immediately. It went viral. Fast. And in that moment, the shift happened. A silent recalibration. The narrative stopped being theirs. It became mine. And the strange part? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. I just felt still, like the air had finally settled after a long, invisible storm. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a headline. It was the beginning of something else. A recalibration not of systems but of power. I didn't respond to the first offer. It came 2 days after the story broke an email with legal headers, padded language, and a number, $8 million. That's what they thought Omega Strand was worth. Not as a partnership. Not as equity. Just a lump sum buyout. With fine print so dense it practically bled ink, a 2-year exclusivity clause, no licensing to competitors, and complete silence on anything that had come before. I read the email twice. Then a third time. Then I closed it. No reply. No negotiation. Just stillness. Because I hadn't fought for Omega Strand to sell it back to the people who tried to erase it. I wanted more than payment. I wanted control. Not to own the system in name, but to choose where it would go, how it would live, and who would never be allowed near it again. So I mapped it out. 3 industries. 3 use cases. No overlap. No dependencies. No single point of failure. The first was Calix Korea Logistics AI firm that had been bleeding efficiency for years. They weren't flashy, but they were hungry. And they understood code. Really understood it. The second was Thalen Grid, a clean energy startup working to stabilize power loads across urban grids in climate-volatile zones. They needed infrastructure. I had it. The third was Xerath Dynamicsa Biotech R&D Group with low ego and high integrity. Quiet people, solving hard problems with no press releases. Each got a license. Each signed the same clause. Licensee shall not partner with, subcontract to, receive funding from, or merge with any entity previously affiliated with Ardentes Labs. They didn't question it. One executive asked if we could soften the language, make it less personal. I smiled and said simply, "You're not just licensing code. You're entering an ecosystem. And in this one I don't allow parasites." We signed all 3 contracts over 10 days. 10 of the most focused, deliberate, satisfying days of my life. And when the final signature hit the final document, I walked into my new office, a real one, with light and windows and a door that closed and stood in front of a wall-mounted map. 3 glowing lines extended from a central node. Omega Strand, branching, evolving, alive. Not trapped in one company. Not hidden under marketing language. Distributed. Resilient. Untouchable. They didn't see it coming. Because they were still trying to fix what they broke. While I had already moved on to building what came next. Ardentes kept spinning their story. Kept patching gaps in public statements. But it didn't matter anymore. Because in every use case, every deployment, every rollout, Omega Strand no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the future. And this time, I chose where it went. I didn't go back to make a scene. No cameras. No announcement. Just me. A coat I liked. And a small silver USB in my pocket. The receptionist looked up when I walked through the glass doors of Ardentes Labs. Her expression flickered recognition, confusion, maybe even fear, but she didn't say a word. I nodded. Kept walking. No one stopped me. No one dared. I moved through the building like a ghost retracing old steps. Same cold teal under my feet. Same flickering hallway light near the break room they never fixed. But something felt hollow. The energy was different. Quieter. Cautious. As if the building itself remembered. I passed by the engineering bullpen. A few people glanced up. Some looked down again, pretending not to see me. But I wasn't here for them. I kept going until I reached the wall. The one that used to hold the nameplates. Polished steel rectangles, each engraved with the title and name of every department lead. That wall had been the closest thing we had to permanence. And mine used to be right in the center. Lead Systems Architect. Elena Marks. Now, there was just a blank space. 4 screw holes in a perfect rectangle. Nothing more. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the plate. Yes, me plate. I had taken it with me the day they fired me. Not out of spite, not even out of pride. But because I knew they wouldn't leave it up. They wouldn't let the truth linger. I lined it up, pulled a small screwdriver from my bag, and screwed it back into place. Click, 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 click. There it was. Etched. Permanent. Undeniable. I stepped back. Not to admire. Just to acknowledge. I didn't need applause. Didn't need witnesses. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about putting something back where it belonged. Not for the company. Not even for the history books. But for me. I turned away and walked to the center work table, the same one where I had debugged voltage surges at 2 a.m., where I had taught Asher the difference between logic branches and procedural failsafes. I reached into my coat one last time and placed the USB on the table. Next to it, I left a folded slip of paper. 6 words. Handwritten. Next time, read what you sign. No threats. No drama. No anger. Just a reminder. I walked out the way I came in. Calm. Whole. Free. Outside, the wind had picked up. Seattle gray, always somewhere between rain and something heavier. But I welcomed it. Because I didn't return for closure. I returned to make sure they never forgot what it cost them when they underestimated silence. They tried again. A week after I reinstalled my nameplate, I got another email from our dentist. Shorter this time. Cleaner, less legalese, more desperation. Subject line. Proposal for IP, reacquisition, urgent. They had doubled the offer. $16 million. Still no partnership. Still no acknowledgement. Just a price tag and a clause that said I'd walk away quietly for good. I didn't answer. I didn't forward it. I didn't even mark it as read. Because they still hadn't learned. They still thought winning meant owning. Controlling. Silencing. But I had already won. Not by yelling. Not by dragging them through court. Not by burning it all down. I won by outlasting them. By building something they couldn't touch. By turning silence into structure and doubt into defense. I licensed Omega Strand to 3 independent companies, each one chosen not just for their mission, but for their character. I watched as the system I created 7 years in the making spread across industries, saving energy grids, optimizing medical labs, streamlining logistics in ways no one expected. And Ardentis? They fell quiet. Investors pulled out. Leadership restructured. The board sent out a press release full of vague phrases like transitioning priorities and exploring new verticals. But by then, no one was listening. Because the people who mattered were already watching something else. A new map. A new direction. Ane had drawn. And no, it wasn't perfect. There were moments I wanted to scream. Nights I questioned if any of it would work. If maybe silence was too risky. Too fragile. But now, I know better. Because silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's what happens when you stop begging to be seen. And start designing a world where you don't need permission. That's the truth no one tells you when you're being dismissed, minimized, made small. That silence you carry? It can be dangerous. But only if you leave it empty. Fill it, structure it, weaponize it, and when the time comes, let it speak for you. With patents, with proof, with systems so elegant they collapse everything built on lies. That's what I did. And I would do it again. So, if you're sitting in a job where they've stopped hearing your voice, if you've been cut from your own creation, if you're building in the shadows, waiting for someone to give you space, don't wait. Design your exit before they design your erasure. If this story spoke to something in you, something quiet but burning, like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder. You don't have to scream to reclaim your power. You just have to know where to place the trigger.